Hello, Laura.
Hello, everybody. Hi. I just want to make sure that you can see the screen. Dean, can you see it?
I can see it, yes.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first Local Energy Scotland webinar. I'm gonna. It's just me and Dean that you can hear just now. For the next 30 minutes, it's going to be a presentation, and then the following 30 minutes, that will be some questions and answers. So if you've got some questions, you can just jot them down and give us them afterwards. I'm just going to briefly introduce Local Energy Scotland and then I'll let you know what's going to happen today. So, Local Energy Scotland are a consortium of 5 Scottish energy charities. We're delivering the CARES scheme on behalf of Scottish Government, which is the Community and Renewable Energy Scheme. We're also advised by Foundation Scotland, Ricardo and Snellbridge for their various expertise. CARES is delivering 3 different strands of support: community renewables, local energy systems, and today it's the local involvement in large-scale projects that we're going to focus on. This can be delivered in a number of ways, including supply chain, community benefit payments, but today we're focusing on shared ownership. So there's going to be a 30-minute presentation, roughly, hopefully maybe a little bit less, so we've got more time for questions and answers. And by the end of the webinar, you should have a good overview of the current situation of shared ownership in Scotland, and you should know who to contact if you've got any shared ownership questions, or if you think you've got a shared ownership project, or if you definitely have a shared ownership project, and what to do about it. My name's Laura Nicolson. I've been working as a shared ownership manager for Local Energy Scotland for the past 2 years, supporting communities alongside our network of development officers and also providing some feedback on policy implementation to the Scottish Government. I've also worked with developers to understand their barriers to implementing shared ownership. During the 30 minutes question and answers, you can interact by either putting your hand up. There's a button that says raise hand, and Dean will know how long you've had your hand up for, so hopefully nobody waits too long. Dean can then unmute you to answer your question, or you can type your question into the chat box and then he'll read it out for me. And thanks to Dean for his help. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, I'm going to give a very brief overview what shared ownership actually is. I'm going to give you a bit of an update on the sector as I've seen it for the past couple of years, what the drivers are, why do people get involved in shared ownership projects in the first place. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what the opportunity is going forward, what kind of work, and for communities that can often be volunteer work, might be required and when, the types of commercial structures that can be used, and then what to do if you think you've got a shared ownership project that you haven't yet identified. And then a little bit at the end about the support and information available from Local Energy Scotland on ways to get involved. I will be sending out the slides afterwards, and a lot of the links are clickable, so you'll be able to access all the information that I'm talking about. And just to let you know, particularly for the questions, this webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards as a video, so you can share that with your colleagues and your fellow community members, and hopefully it'll be a good resource for getting to know what shared ownership is. So what is shared ownership? Sometimes it is a bit of a misleading term. Shared ownership is where a community invests as a meaningful financial partner in a renewable energy project. And sometimes they will invest in shares and they will own a stake in the project. And other times they will invest in a shared revenue contract, which means they'll receive the royalties from the project, but they won't own the actual asset. So this ownership is the right to the revenue. And that's what we call a shared revenue project. I'm mostly going to talk about onshore wind projects today because the large majority of shared ownership projects at the moment and the opportunities are currently in medium to large scale onshore wind. However, the principles and the practice of shared ownership can apply to any renewable energy project, and the Scottish Government would like to see shared ownership as an industry standard across all of the renewable technologies. Shared ownership and community benefit are distinct, and the Scottish Government has good practice principles on both. One on community benefit and what to offer for a community benefit fund, which is currently marked at £5,000 per megawatt installed, and the other being a shared ownership deal. So just to reiterate, it's shared ownership that we're talking today. So here we're trying to illustrate what the kind of flow of funds are for a community to invest in a renewable energy scheme that's owned by somebody else. Sometimes the misconception can be that the community might have the money in their pockets already to do the investment. And this might sometimes be the case, but more typically, there will be a cost of finance. So we'll have to go to a third party to find the money to invest. So the equation roughly goes, the share of the revenue or profits or the dividends where ownership is the case, that flowing from the wind farm. Subtract the cost of finance. So what is the return, the rate of interest on the finance that you've received from the third party or third parties, and the cost of running a community vehicle. So the new corporate entity is very likely to be set up in order to actually undertake the investment. And that will make the community profit, which is for projects or redistribution. There's a variety of sources for communities to access finance, and they need a lot of information from the typically the developer who's actually constructing the project. The main concern that we have is that the equation is positive and that there is a community profit for projects and redistribution. And that is the main motivation for communities to take part in a shared ownership project, to generate a sustainable community profit for long-term and aspirational projects in their community. Oh, I've got the wrong slide in there, sorry. So I was just going to give a brief update on the sector, what we know, what we don't know, what's happened and what's happening now. There's been a big change in onshore wind and a lot of renewable technologies over the last couple of years. It was an interesting time for me to start looking at shared ownership in 2015, just after some of the big changes in the subsidy regimes. Shared ownership is a key policy area for Scottish Government, and so there's a lot of interest, particularly from developers, to engage with communities and offer a shared ownership deal. We at Local Energy Scotland are currently supporting 47 shared ownership projects, and some of which have multiple community organisations involved in the project, 2 of which are hydro and the rest are medium to large scale wind, so you can see why we're concentrating on onshore wind at the moment. A lot of them are at various stages, many still in the planning system, and some are awaiting grid connections or financial investment decisions. There are several which have identified clearly a community partner or partners, and they're working on the nitty-gritty of the details, and others are just starting in the engagement process with communities. Many of the projects involved more than one community organisation, and this is something we can talk about later. Typically, the first point of contact might be the community council or a community body, such as a development trust, where there's one set up in the area. There are a number of shared ownership project examples, but there is not yet a momentum of shared ownership projects becoming the norm. A lot of the examples that we have are smaller scale, local landowner, small to medium scale, onshore wind and hydro, where the community have bought the equivalent of one turbine, obviously not in the case of hydro. Examples such as Altgeric in Argyll, Shervis up in the Highlands, and Stewart Energy in near Lesmahago, just off the M74 there. These days, the types of projects that we're looking at are typically larger scale onshore wind with utility scale developers. The offers are more commonly shared revenue through a proportion of the total wind farm is offered is around 5 to 10, but sometimes more and sometimes less % of the total wind farm size, and the level of finance required, although that is a small percentage, can sometimes be many of millions of pounds. So in summary, we know that shared ownership is happening and lots of community organisations are engaged with developers in discussions about how it might happen. What we don't know is exactly when the investment dates will be, where the finance will come from, or how profitable the investment will be. That is where we are here to help communities access professional advice through the CARE Startup and through our team of experienced development officers. We want to ensure that you're able to access the information necessary to make an informed decision about a shared ownership opportunity in your area. An often asked question is whether communities from out with the area of the project can invest. We'll go on to talk about this in the questions and answers if you like, but at the moment the main drivers are local, and that means the local community organisations are the first port of call for developers. There's a number of sources for financing shared ownership, including REEF, or as they're now known, EIF, and high street banks, as well as larger institutions, and possibly a mix of crowdsourcing or a mix of all of these types of finance. There's something we're working closely with EIF on, and they have experience of investing in shared ownership projects for communities in the small to medium scale over the past few years, so they're a great partner to work with. So what are the drivers for shared ownership? Why do people want to engage in this opportunity? Well, a couple of them are really driven by the Scottish Government's ambitious targets. By 2020, at least half of the newly consented renewable energy projects will have an element of shared ownership. I'm linking here to the onshore wind policy statement from December 2017 and also to the Scottish Energy Strategy, also of December 2017. And there's more information on shared ownership in the onshore wind policy statement. We also have a target which we're driven by, which is the 2020 target of 1 gigawatt of community and locally owned energy, of which we've achieved over 600 megawatts already, but there's still obviously work to do. Shared ownership is a major way for communities to participate in the wealth that's generated by significant energy infrastructure and benefit from the wealth created by their natural resources. So why might a developer want to engage with the community? Well, sometimes they're trying to smooth the planning consent. In the new subsidy-free regime, taller turbines are required to maximise the income from wind turbines, and this requires a good relationship locally. Access to local knowledge is also a benefit for developers, as well as doing the right thing and fostering good neighbourly relationships for the longevity of the project. Developers and communities can access rates relief for shared ownership schemes, although this might not be a huge economic factor for developers due to the de minimis limitations. It can certainly bolster the economics for the communities. For communities, the attraction is to create a sustainable income stream to achieve ambitious community projects. Community organisations will also be attracted to the benefits to their local economy. Shared ownership is a partnership, so it's important that good relationships are created from the outset. This can take time and effort on both parts, and regular and open communication is the key to that. So what is the opportunity? Why are we working so hard to try and unlock this for community organisations? So you can see from this table, there's a huge potential for investment in the new wave of onshore wind developments. What we're showing here is the number of megawatts that would be in community ownership. That's not the total megawatts of installation. It's the proportion that we estimate would be of community projects of those which are on our books right now. So there's a huge potential for investment in this new wave of onshore wind developments. We want to work hard to identify the barriers for communities so that this opportunity for community profit is realised. This is by no means a given at this time. This table represents the potential where a developer is keen to engage with communities and where there's at least one community that is exploring the opportunity with them. It should be noted that there is 3 significant remote island wind schemes in the consented figure, including Viking, which is in the region of 150 megawatts. In order to unlock this potential, shared ownership must be as simple to access as possible. A clear understanding of the new economic model for onshore wind must be gained, and the correct access to a suitable financial product must be identified. EIF have supported many of the projects previously, and they do have a budget of 20 million for the projects in 2018-19. Although many of the projects on this table won't be built in that timescale, it does signify the ambition of the Scottish Government to provide a financial project for shared ownership projects. So if the timescales are not 2018-19, what are the timescales? We would estimate that is around about 2020 to 2025, there's a significant opportunity for shared ownership projects to be realised. With that being the case, there is a need for the work to start now. Some of the identified barriers at the moment are mostly related to the subsidy-free onshore wind not currently being built out and the economic model being worked out by developers. And that means that because the developers are not yet clear on their return on investment, subsequently, communities don't have enough information to make clear investment decisions. There is a CARES startup grant which can support communities to access professional advice, and there are many proven examples of communities who want to engage. Communities have done shared ownership before, and where there is a good opportunity to benefit, there will be volunteer effort in many of the places. Right now, a lot of communities are confused as to whether or not there is a planning gain that puts some of them off engaging until the project is definitely going ahead. Also, given that there isn't a lot of financial information and therefore not a clear financial product, it's difficult for communities to make positive decisions. Once this information is available, the uptake of shared ownership will increase and communities will be keen, I think, to take up the opportunity, and that's where we're here to help. Developers are also coming up with really good solutions to some of the issues in the offers they're making to communities, and they're working hard to provide the information that is available at the right time. So what kind of work is going to be necessary by volunteer effort or paid effort in the community, and when? It's quite hard to determine the level of work that's required and the likely timescales, and therefore plot out the project management and the necessary finance for the project. Onshore wind projects can take months, if not years, in planning system, and the grid connection dates might be far away. So it might seem like it's a far off prospect. We can help you identify what work is required and when. It's usually worth plotting out what your community or communities' needs are, particularly when working with more than one community. It's worth considering how you'll work together, facilitating the needs of communities involved and identifying a mechanism for that sooner rather than later. Typically, a shared ownership offer will be made to one community body, and sometimes that will be made up of more than one community organisation, so there's some work to do there, creating a suitable vehicle for the distribution of profits, as well as creating a suitable vehicle to raise the finance to actually make the investment. From my experience, this can be the trickiest part, getting together and agreeing the purpose. And once that is worked out, a mechanism to access finance, invest, and then distribute profits can flow more easily. And we can help with this through access to the CARES grant, so please feel free to get in touch. It's always worth being open with developers about your concerns. It might be planning, it might be financial return, or maybe it's the fluctuating returns. It's worth trying to negotiate terms with developers that suit your community's needs. Local Energy Scotland are a free and impartial advice service, and we can help you understand any questions that you will have. In terms of the commercial structure, it's not something to fix out straight away. I think the first thing to do is work out what you want to do, what your partner is offering, what the terms and conditions are, what timing of investment is, the cost of the investment, how will you be repaid, will it be a share of revenue or dividends from shares, will there be a minimum return level? That will then help you identify what financial products are available, and it might be a mixed. And the commercial structure that you choose for your community organisations to raise the finance to invest will be influenced by these things. And then there are many commercial structures that you can use in order to do that. To put it quite simply, a lot of the structures will look something like this diagram, where there is a community umbrella vehicle. I've called it an umbrella here because we are often looking at community organisations in multiples for these large schemes. And that vehicle will be responsible for driving the purpose of the community organisations, what the social purpose is, and what the redistribution of the profits will be used for. In turn, that community umbrella vehicle will create a community investment vehicle, and the purpose of that will be to access some kind of third-party finance, whether it be through EIF, whether it be through a bank, whether it be through some crowdsourcing or another type of finance. And that community investment vehicle will make the shared ownership investment in the wind farm or other technology. And then the dividends will be paid through the green line. The finance will be paid off, and then the main aim is that the green line between the community investment vehicle, the community umbrella vehicle, is a positive one, and that can be used for ambitious community projects. So that's my overview of shared ownership in a nutshell. It's not the nitty-gritty of how to do a shared ownership project, but I'm trying to give you an idea of where we are right now and the types of ways that we can support you. So what if you think you've got a shared ownership project that you haven't quite realised? If you're a community organisation and you really want to get involved in a shared ownership project, you can check on the planning system. Are there any projects locally that are going through the planning system? Check with your local community council and have they been contacted by any developers who are looking to build a renewable energy project in your area. You can get in touch with Local Energy Scotland and we have a good knowledge of what's going on and we can help you identify if there is a project. You might want to check with your local authority. For a developer, the main source of contact would be initially through the community councils or to do some research on what community bodies there are locally. And it's always worth checking with us as we have a good network of understanding of the community organisations that there are locally. I'm now just going to briefly go through some of the support and information available. Most of these links are clickable, so when you've got the PDF at the end, you've got all the information at your fingertips to find out more. So Local Energy Scotland have a lovely network of development officers across the different regions who you can get in touch with. We've also got a lot of online tools and resources on our newly revamped website. And there's a nice map of operational projects and some case studies so you can find out more and get inspired. We've got up to £20,000 per project for professional advice and a framework of legal, financial and project management contractors. So you can access the type of professional advice where people that people have used before. If you want to come and meet us and other inspirational projects, get to know folk, then the CARES conference, save the date, is 18th to 19th of April this year. You can also check in on the good practice principles. This is a very handy booklet with all of the information on how the Scottish Government would like to see shared ownership going forward. There's also a nice book of case studies that the Friends of the Earth Scotland did last year, which tells you all about some of the existing shared ownership projects and the different models which are available. You can always get in contact with us here at Local Energy Scotland, either directly or through the 0808 number. And that's me. Thanks for listening. Over to Dean to let me know if there's any questions. You can raise your hand or type your question into the box.
Thank you, Laura. Nothing is coming through at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, there is one. So the way I will do, if you do have your hand up, I will just unmute you. So there is a question coming from Dan McCullum. So I will just unmute you, Dan, if that's all right. And you should be unmuted now. So
yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Laura. It's very interesting. I'm calling from Wales actually, so I'm feeling a bit of a fraud. But we're still looking at shared ownership here as well. I just wanted to check, just in terms of the amount of funding that is available. I think you said it's like 20,000 for kind of initial advice. How much, I suppose, how much does that kind of go up to on? How much would you expect it to go up to roughly on a kind of like a 10 megawatts type wind farm? And also, what level of contribution would you expect from the commercial developer as well?
Okay, that's a good question. Oh, well, I'm a bit echoey, sorry. The £20,000 is for access to professional fees, and CARES is a flexible fund, so sometimes that's going to go over. We recognise that often because of the longevity of the project, that might need to be extended. Currently, that can be extended into a CARES loan, which is up to 150,000, which is a pre-planning loan, and we have approved one or two of those loans for shared ownership projects, but I think just to get clear on the question, the pre-planning loan is available to make investments in the development costs, but actually the more typical way that shared ownership is happening right now is that communities are not participating in the development costs, but they're being invited to invest usually at the construction or operational phase of the commercial project. That help?
Yeah, okay. I guess because we're working on a project in Wales with Energy, and it is at the development stage. So they've won a tender to build on sort of basically Welsh government land, and so they haven't applied yet for planning, but that's should be going in the next kind of year or so. So we're just trying to get the joint venture sort of structure correct between Energy and the community organisation. So I guess it is for the development costs. So it's interesting that there's up to 150,000 that can be provided in a loan, because that would be very useful. To know if that could be applied in Wales as well, but then how much? Because there are some projects in Scotland, aren't there, shared ownership that were through a sort of development phase before construction. So in those projects, do you know how much the developer contributed to the kind of shared ownership model? Working out the legal structures.
I think in terms of the shared ownership projects that have happened already that I have an awareness of, there was a participation both from the community and from the developer in working out the legal costs, but that's certainly something that we've contributed to. I can do a bit of research, but my awareness is of projects that I've been involved in, the community didn't actually pay for any of the development costs of the project, so they didn't pay for any of the bird surveys or the that kind of development cost. So I'm not sure if what you're asking me is £20,000 enough, because it often might not be, and it's probably, once you get to the stage of financial close, £20,000 is probably enough, but there are costs before that. And it also, I guess, it depends on what the financial structures are, what the due diligence requirements are. Also depends on whether the community organisation is set up already or if they're setting up a new community organisation. So there's lots of different factors. There's lots of different costs that can be required, but are not always required in terms of the legal structures. It's I guess just not sure whether you're asking if communities have actually paid for the development costs in terms of the actual project, or whether it's the development costs in terms of developing the shared ownership part of the project.
Yeah, no, it's just the cost of the shared ownership part of it. So Energy are paying for the planning kind of related costs.
Okay.
But it's just getting the option and the kind of shared revenue agreement, trying to get them to pay for as much of that as possible, really. Just what is a realistic level of funding that you need, and what to expect from the developer.
I think what we are providing with the professional fees is access to an impartial professional advisor, but often it's actually the developer that's creating the offer of shared revenue or the joint venture offer in the first place. So they will have set up quite a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Does that
that's
help?
fine, Laura. Yeah, it does. It does. I'll stop kind of asking questions now, but it's all right. I may well phone you back.
Oh, sorry, Dan, you seem to have faded out. I don't think we did that deliberately.
Yeah, that's right. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's fine, Laura. That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks. I might just put you back on mute, Dan, just so we don't get any background noise. We didn't, but just in case, you know, we don't get any background noise from your end. Laura, this question did come through before you answered the second half of that, so I do apologise if you did incorporate some of your answer into this question, but I'm just going to read it as it is. So, how do most shared ownership projects raise their finance? Are there examples of community share offers to raise some or all of their finance? Is there a possibility for mixed finance incorporating both social lending and community shares? Did you get all that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So far, shared ownership projects have raised their finance either through REEF or through Social Investment Scotland. Those are both, I think, what you might call like social lenders, or through one of the high street banks. By which I mean the Co-op or Santander or Clydesdale, and usually in conjunction with the developer's finance. So sometimes the community organisation can piggyback onto the main project finance for the project. The type of shared ownership that we're looking at going forward is a different scale, and it's a different type of developer. So the utility scale developers might not be using project finance for projects which are over 50 megawatts and sometimes a lot more. We haven't yet got to financial close on that type of project. It might be that where the developer is willing and able, they could lend the community the money. That certainly was the case in Fintry, which is an old shared ownership project, but there's still lots of lessons to learn. So that's about 10 years old now, and that's what happened there. We haven't yet seen a shared ownership project that's used a share offer. However, there have been some projects which use the shared offer in a joint venture where an energy for all model was used before 2015, when there was a legislation change. So you can no longer use a cooperative model, but you can use a BENCOM. But before that, the actual bona fide co-op was used in a shared revenue agreement with Falk Renewables. So there's a couple of those examples in the Friends of the Earth brochure that there's a link to on the slides. So I guess, like, I'm sorry that I can't give a clear answer, but I think yes, that there will be able to be a mix of crowdfunding and institutional funding. Almost, I think that we might have to have that mix, but we haven't got an example yet. Obviously, there are lots of really good examples of wholly owned community projects using a BENCOM. I hope that helps a little.
If it doesn't help, then I think it was Rob. I'll just make sure. So I do realise that there is someone else with their hand up, but I think this is a follow-up question to the answer. So maybe it's good just to sort of have them both at the same time. So it's coming from also coming from Wales. So Wales don't know what REEF is. REIF.
Sorry.
So how? So I'll just read out the question again. So not aware of what REEF is. How important is Scottish Government support in terms of finance? Was the second part of the question.
So REEF is a Renewable Energy Investment Fund, which is a Scottish government bank for renewable energy, and they have a community strand. They've recently been had their remit widened to low carbon, so that's why they're now, well, you could say EIF, but I'm saying EIF. So that's who they are, and they have been the main source of finance for, or at least the how would they call themselves, like the finance of last resort for community organisations. But actually, they have funded quite a lot, at least 3 shared ownership projects in the last year, and more still. So yeah, that has been important, and I do think they will be important going forward.
Okay, the next question will come from Ian Patterson. So I'm going to unmute you now, Ian, if you want to crack on with your question. We should be able to hear
you. Thank you, and good morning to all. Ian Patterson here, Chief Exec, Storage Uist on South Uist in the Western Isles of Scotland. There was, Laura, lots of mention of onshore wind. However, there is a new category of wind now that will affect us, that being island wind. Is there any separate advice or criteria that is either applicable now or in development that will be specific to the island wind category?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so the remote island wind category is now part of the CFD pot going forward, which is contracts for difference, which is basically a market mechanism to set the price of the energy generated by a wind farm. Like, there are several high-profile shared ownership projects which would be looking to bid in, because it's an auction process, to the CFD. I guess in terms of like the any differences in the advice that we offer.
Yes, the question was more to do with, sorry, Laura, to do with Local Energy Scotland and care support, etc.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting to that, Ian. So I just wanted to set the context. Not everybody might be aware, but like, our support isn't different to any community organisation, but there will be different like support required. So the support asked of us from communities where they're participating in remote island wind might be different. Like, so far, the CARES package is fairly flexible, so these are the types of support that we've got, but we will respond to any extra needs that communities have. At the moment, it's really the financial model that's different for remote island wind, in that there is an identified revenue through, or potential revenue through, the CFD. So yeah, so we have a financial modelling tool which we can use with shared ownership projects, but there isn't a specifically different support stream for remote island wind. Okay,
that's good. I have a second part to that question. Is the CARE startup grants available to communities? Is each participating group will probably wish to seek financial advice and perhaps other types of advice. Is the financial support available at an individual group level, or only at the community umbrella vehicle level?
At the moment, and I do want to reiterate, CARES is flexible. So if there are specific requests, then we're always willing to look at that. But at the moment, the criteria is it's one CARES startup grant per project. So it's about the project, and the community organisations would have to come together to access that CARES startup grant. Unless there's a situation where that just isn't suitable, we can look at that, but at the moment it is one per wind or other type of renewable energy project.
Okay, so it's per the project rather than the groups who are considering participating in the project.
Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. That's answered that question quite clearly.
No problem.
Thank you, and I'll just put you on mute as well. And we got a question from Chris Perkins. So Chris, I'll just unmute you now, and you should.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I'm from Ecotricity, and your slides kind of infer that communities will join together and form a vehicle and then approach the developer. We've gone the other way around, and we've actually tried to instigate a couple of shared ownership schemes. Can you just say something about how you would define the community? Because in one case we approached a lot of organisations who didn't, a lot of community organisations who didn't want to coalesce and form a body. And in this second case, we've approached one organisation, but it's actually very difficult to ask a third-party organisation to then go out and communicate with all of the other groups in the area and try and infuse them. So could you just give me some sort of definition of what you think the community is? Is it the host community councils? Is it the local authority that the scheme's in, or somewhere in between?
Okay, just to clarify one thing, I didn't mean to infer that communities go and look for shared ownership projects. It's very much more typical that the developers are approaching the communities in the local area where there is a project, because these projects are driven by the developers, not by communities. So just sorry for misleading there. In terms of defining the community, I don't think I've ever done a talk on shared ownership in the past 2 years or more, or on community energy, in fact, without being asked, how do you define a community? And I don't think I've ever actually had an answer. It is a process. One thing that we are clear on in the good practice principles is that it should be inclusive. So one, that it should ensure community members who can't afford to contribute financially can still engage. So that's about it not just being an investment for local individuals, but it's a community organisation where everybody can participate, and also not to cherry pick communities. So geographically neighbouring communities should be given the first option. I do know that it's very difficult, particularly when there isn't a planning consent, because with larger onshore schemes, they can be divisive within communities. So I don't think that there's an easy way to make that engagement, particularly where there's people who are against it, because although not necessarily everyone in the community or community council or even community organisations will hold the same view, they might not want to put their head above the parapet before the scheme has got planning. So that can be a really tricky situation. But our guidance is very much that we would want the offer to be available for the communities in the local vicinity, as well as further afield, should you wish to do that.
Okay. All right. In one case, we have two community councils, one who won't engage and one who said they're not interested in any sort of shared ownership, because the community council has officially taken a stance that it will oppose the development. Mm-hmm. So maybe we just have to wait and see if we get consent, and then approach them after that and see if they change their tune.
Yeah, and that can be the case, and I think that it is a wise stance to take, that you will still make the offer after the planning consent is gained. So I think it can be hard, not just for organisations but for individuals, where there is where the scheme is potentially divisive in the area.
Okay.
Thank you, and I've just muted you again, Chris. So another question has come through, Laura. Are there disadvantages, advantages between revenue stake and equity stake models for the community, an example in terms of being able to raise finance?
Yes, definitely. Because if you have an equity stake, then you have ownership of a part of an asset, and then you can secure your finance against the ownership of part of that asset, depending on the type of equity stake that you've got. If you've got a revenue share, so your ownership is of a contract of the revenue, like the owner of the wind farm is obliged to pay you a certain percentage of the revenue, whether that be net or gross revenue, and what comes off before you get the revenue. That's more difficult to secure against. So I think that's the pro of equity and the con of the revenue. I guess on the other side, almost certainly the equity will be minority. There might or might not be voting rights with that, so you might not be able to influence how decisions are made or how dividends are shared. We have some extra guidance on that as a joint venture, extra guidance on the website linked to the good practice principles. And I guess in terms of the shared revenue, the pro is it might be that's easier to model in terms of like what the income's actually going to be. So that's a very brief overview of the pros and cons, and it will very much depend on the individual circumstances of the project and of the communities involved. And also sometimes it will just depend on what's actually being offered. It might not be that there's an option. Hope that makes sense.
There's nothing else coming through at the moment, Laura. So I don't know if you just want to give it a minute or two for any last questions to come through, or.
Yeah, let's give it another minute. I guess thanks very much to everybody for first of all listening, and then also like for asking some really interesting questions. Shared ownership is can be quite a complex area, and there isn't always a straight answer. So hopefully I've managed to answer as clearly as possible to all of the questions. But if anybody has another, if you're the type of person that it's actually maybe later on today that the question comes to you, please feel free to get in touch and have a chat, and that's what we're here for. And the more questions people ask, the more we can try and work out towards the answers.
Joe actually has a question, but I closed it down and got rid of it, so I do apologize, Joe. I might, hopefully, can I unmute you, Joe? Is that okay? Maybe. Hello, Joe? Joe?
I'm not sure that Joe has got a microphone on his headset thing.
Yeah, it came up with a question, and then I closed it. Instead of maximizing it, I closed it, and then deleted it. So, if you want to send it through again, Joe, that would be good. Okay. So it says, the question is, so if my community has been approached by a developer and the developer has offered us up to 10% of the project, but no further details, what further information do we need in order to meaningfully assess the offer, and how do we get them to give it to us?
Okay, so I'm going to make the assumption that the project has not yet got planning. So a firm financial model might be something that's difficult for the developer to share, because they're at that stage where there's too many variables to work out. I guess the most important two things I would ask, and I mean, first of all, I would encourage your community to come and have a chat with us, and we can help you to just make a list of questions and then go back to the developer, and we can also come along with you to a meeting with the developer to help flesh out some of the questions. But the two things I would first ask are, when do you want us to invest up to 10%? And what will it cost? And obviously that I don't mean like it's going to be a tenner or 10 million. And I mean like, will we be coming in at the same level as the developer? So will we be paying 10% of the capex of the project, or will we be expected to be paying at market value at the time that we invest? And so we're really looking to see, are the community realizing, are the developer releasing some value to the community for their participation? So I guess that would be the first two things I would suggest asking to open the door for the conversation.
Very good. Well, there's nothing else coming through just now. So thank you very much, Laura, for your time and for your knowledge. Wait, no, I lied. There is one more coming through. Oh. Dan, sorry, Dan. I will unmute you just now, and if you want to ask a question, you can now, Dan.
Yeah. Hi, Laura. Hi again. Just to follow up on that point you made about lenders lending against equity or sort of renewable energy revenue share agreements. Have REEF lent any money against revenue share agreements to support community organisations? Because obviously they wouldn't be able to take sort of full security on the project. But are they able to find, are there any things that they have been able to do which makes them sufficiently comfortable with lending against that type of project?
Yeah, I'm not aware of REEF funding a purely shared revenue project. Sorry, I'm being a bit slow because I'm just trying to make sure that I'm giving you the correct answer, because there's one project I'm not 100% sure that I think REEF are usually funding directly into the special purpose vehicle which will be set up for the project. Sometimes I think that the community are realizing their value through a shared revenue agreement, although REEF are funding directly into the SPV. So I think that the answer is yes. That REEF will look to find a way to make that work by working usually with the senior lender to the project, where it's a project finance.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Should we just give it a minute or a couple of maybe 30 seconds or so in case there's any last questions that come through, Laura, or do you want to call it?
Yeah, well, I guess we can give it another minute. We have the time, so
yeah.
I won't be offended if you sign off now, though. If you feel like we've answered the questions you need. I think that's probably as good.
That's probably good. Yeah, I can see people dropping off. Well, thanks, Laura. I know I learnt something today, so I'm sure everyone else did.
Thank you, Dean.
Take the time to make those slides and to pass on your knowledge. And as you said, I don't know where you want me to upload the webinar, but let me know and I can upload it and pass that information on to.
Yeah, we'll have, I guess, a list of the attendees so we can send that directly, and then we'll pop it up on our website and news in the news stories as well, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, Dean, for facilitating.
My pleasure. Thank you everyone for attending as well.
Yes, thank you very much.